So as a child, Robert Louis Stevenson was a sickly kid, poor health. And one night, when he was quite sick, his nurse found him with his nose pressed against the frosty pane in his bedroom window. Now the nurse fussed, said, "Come, you know how they do. Come away from the window. You'll catch your death of a cold." But young Frost, did not budge. He sat there memorized as he watched an old lamplighter slowly work his way through the black night, lighting each street light along his route. And Frost pointed out and said to her, "Look, there's a man poking holes in the darkness." Now, during this series entitled Sharing Light, we have been invited to remember those particularly who shared light, who pointed us toward the more excellent way, those saints in our lives whose faith was vibrant and visible for us. And we have a whiteboard on the table in the narthex, and if you have not done so, I want to encourage you to write down the name or the names of the people, of those special people who shared the light of Christ with you. But that's not the only thing I want you to write down this morning. I'd like for you to think about and respond, and the board will be up for a few more weeks, and then we'll hang it. But how will you share light with others this year? How will you share light with others? And I just want to invite you to write that down. It doesn't have to be a complicated issue, but it is a challenging request. How will you share light with others? Our scripture reading makes it clear. It declares that we are the light of the world and we should let our light shine before others. Or we could say, we are the people who now poke holes in the darkness. Now, this passage is familiar for most of us. It's one of those memory verses that we learned about 100 years ago in Sunday school, and yet we still remember. This text is included in the section on the Sermon on the Mount, and it follows the Beatitudes. What we know is light is a very significant metaphor in Scripture, and the word light occurs on the very first and the very last pages of Scripture. It's used around 265 times in the Bible, and I just invite you to challenge me on that one, because that means you'll have to read the entire Bible and underline every time it's used. But what scholarship has taught us is that in the ancient world, the sea and darkness were synonymous with gods of chaos and death. In the imagination of those ancient people, darkness was understood as a problem. So the creation of light and the separation of light and darkness, particularly in Genesis, communicates God's authority over the gods of death and darkness and chaos. In Scripture, light literally comes out of God's voice. Let there be light. For what darkness is life apart from God. And light is that which shines God's presence in our life and in the life of this world. We also know light's necessary for life. It's necessary for us to thrive and flourish and prosper. And we also know that, particularly in Psalms, that there is a strong connection between light and life. And it's not just a biological life or existence, but in Scripture, life and light equals the fullness of life. The fullness of light shines in the light. Light is also a symbol for us. It's a symbol of wisdom. Think about the word enlightened. Means to give knowledge or understanding to someone. And what happens when people are inspired by a new idea? They speak about a light bulb going off. Or if you gain perspective or a new understanding of a situation or an idea, you say you can look at things in a new light. Light stands for the goodness of life. Light is also this amazing symbol of hope. Think about it. We know that when we shine light, when we share light, it can bring about real change and change for the better in people's lives. The light of hope is always stronger than the darkness of discouragement and despair. No matter how dark circumstances are, God can change them by shining God's light into our lives. I read a story about a young boy. He was about 9 or 10. He went off to Europe with his parents, and part of their tour was visiting the great cathedrals of the past. Now, the boy was not really thrilled at this, but he was with his parents in Europe at 9 or 10 years old, so that wasn't all that bad. But they visited cathedral after cathedral, and he saw the massive stained glass portraits and of the disciples and of the saints of the early church, and he was impressed for a little guy at the beautiful stained glass windows. So when he returned, his Sunday school teacher asked what he liked most about the great churches in Europe, and he thought for a minute, and he said, it was a sense of God being really big. That's what I liked about it, that God was really big. And the Sunday school teacher asked how he would define a saint. And as his mind kind of went back to those large, beautiful stained glass windows, this is what he said to his Sunday school teacher. A saint is a person that the light shines through. The faithful become a source of life, and our lives are an ongoing witness to the reality of Christ's presence in the world. You are the light of the world. Let it shine. So how do we let it shine? Here's a few things. First, we just simply have to connect with each other. I'm not going to encourage you or invite you or to challenge you to go knock on doors and witness, or I don't want to catch you out with the sign on the corner of 41 and Stickney Point. That's not what we need to do. It's not where we start. How we share light with others is we connect. And there are plenty of people every single day in our lives that we bump into. Amazing people enter into our lives every day. And that's where we authentically connect with each other. And that means we generally show interest and care for each other. We learn from each other. And if we're going to be a people who share light, who let light shine through us, we do that by connecting with other people. Then we have to commit to building up relationships, because you can't really trust somebody if you don't have a relationship with them. And when you trust people, you're able to share who you are, what you believe. And so to build up trust, we just have to learn to be a little more reliable to each other. Because reliability means that you can be counted on. And reliability builds up trust. Trust helps us to share light. And the final thing is we just got to live like Christ. We got to preach the gospel at all times, and if necessary, we use some words. But we have to live Christ-like every day. And our faith should be vibrant and visible to others. So connect. Build up the relationship. Be reliable and live your life Christ-like. That will help us shine light wherever we go and whoever we bump into. So there's a story about a pilot who flew a small single-engine plane, and one night it was just about dusk, and he was headed toward a small country airport. Night fell quicker than he anticipated. However, by the time he reached the airport, it was impossible for him to distinguish the paved landing strip in the darkness. And his little plane was not equipped with all that fancy navigational instruments. No one seemed to be around the airport to turn on the runway lights. He could not see the ground, and he could not chance hitting a house in the darkness. So he just started circling the airport around and around and around and around. 2 hours he circled in the darkness, burning off the fuel, so when he fell from the sky, it would not explode on impact and further increase the risk to others. So something on the ground happened. Someone heard the plane circling the airport and guessed that there was a problem. And immediately she jumped into her car and headed for the airport, not knowing how to turn on the switch to the runway. She settled for driving up and down with her car on the runway, with the high beam light showing the pilot the dimensions of the runway. And then she pulled her car off at the end of the runway, and the pilot followed those two lights and made a safe landing. So here's what I get from the story. Some days you may not feel like or feel as if one little light will help much. You may not feel that your light will help anyone very much at all. But let me be direct. You may think your light is small and this world is big and the problems are bigger. But your light is enough. It's enough to help someone in need. It's enough. Your light is enough to bring someone in before they run out of fuel or faith and crash. Your light is enough. Let it shine. Share the light. It's more than a stewardship theme. It is who we are and what we do. You can share your light everywhere you go. In your relationships, at your work, in your condo, in your neighborhood, welcoming stranger and guests. We can share it by helping others. We can share it by affirming each other's uniqueness. We can share our light as we share our gifts and our talents and our treasures, our passion and love with others.